Hi, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. Thanks so much for joining us. Today, I have George Fraser, who is the CEO and co-founder of Fivetran, which is a company with a pretty amazing backstory here we'll hear about. They have a client roster now that includes ASICS, Condé Nast, Hermes, Square, Thomson Reuters, the social proof you can want from a client list. So George is joining us today from his home in Oakland. Thanks so much for being here, George.
Nice to be with you, Karen.
So you founded Fivetran in 2012 with a lifelong friend, Taylor Brown. Would you please tell us your founding story and your starting vision for Fivetran?
Yeah, it's a kind of an unusual and fun part of the founding story of Fivetran is that Taylor and I knew each other growing up. Actually, our families have been friends going back to the 1920s that we know of. I mean, it may be further. And that, starting a company with a friend can be great. It can be terrible. For us, it's been great. And we still work together every week to make the company better. We still really divide the responsibility, and it's a big responsibility.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's that part of it has been really fantastic. But you asked, what was the founding story and the initial vision? Short version, we started with a different idea. So at the end of 2012, when we started the company, the concept was a vertically integrated data from data source all the way to analysis, a full stack tool. Initially for scientists was the very original idea, which was not very long lived because I was a scientist before becoming a tech CEO. And then it turned into data analysis for business people. And it was still this full stack vision for the first 2 years. And we went through many iterations of that, always trying to get people to use it, talking to them. Hey, is it any good now? Do you actually want to use this thing for real? And eventually we started to get this request, which is people just wanted one slice of that stack. They just wanted the data integration. That was the thing that we had really done differently, is we had built some automated data integrations behind the scenes. And so that one piece of the original vision ended up becoming the entire company. And I said yes to that feature request, got our first customer in March of 2015, and our second customer a couple of weeks later. And then it was a little bit of a slow liftoff for the first, 18 months. And then it started to grow really fast, along with the whole cloud data warehouse ecosystem.
Yeah. Wow, terrific. So I know you were Y Combinator grads. Where did that come in along that journey?
That was right at the beginning. So we applied to YC before we had even finished incorporating the company. I remember when we got in, YC couldn't actually wire us the money yet because we hadn't gotten our incorporation papers back from Delaware. And we had the idea. We had just started, and YC was incredibly valuable for us. It really helped set the tone of shipping fast, talking to users, and the company wouldn't be here without YC. There's no doubt about it.
That's great. So you told me earlier you were talking to us from your home in Oakland today. I know the company is still there, correct? I know you're now a global brand, but there's a commitment to the community of Oakland from you and the organization?
Yeah, so our largest office is here. It's in downtown Oakland. I can actually squint. I think I can see it out my aisle. If I go upstairs, I can see it out the window.
Yeah.
And we were originally actually in San Francisco, but we moved out here a few years ago because we just found most of the employees were in the East Bay. It's a funny thing about the Bay Area. Everyone tends to focus on San Francisco, but actually most of the population in the Bay Area is in the East Bay. And so we figured it would be an advantage in recruiting if we were in Oakland rather than in San Francisco, so you didn't have to go through that tunnel every morning. And I think that's been true for us, and it's been a really good place for us. But as you said, now we are all over the place. So we have a really large presence in Denver. My co-founder actually moved back to Denver a few years ago. That's where he's originally from. And we have a big presence in Ireland, a big presence in Serbia, and a big presence in India, and a few other places.
Yeah, wonderful. I lived in Sausalito for a couple of years, and so that I could drive over the Golden Gate Bridge to go to work every day. But I'm not sure that today that would be such a good idea. So great to have your office near you. So just in general, right, we've got many businesses now moving their data to the cloud. And of course, I think those that haven't, that are of any size at all, will. And I saw somewhere you referred to as a digital shipping company. Yeah. How has this, the sort of this move to the cloud impacted you and what you do for your clients?
Well, we've really been riding that wave. So often new companies arise, when there's platform shifts, and there's almost like a chain of platform shifts that leads to Fivetran. So there's the platform shift to the cloud, which leads to the cloud data warehouses like Redshift and then Snowflake were sort of the key ones in our early years. And then that leads to us for complicated technological reasons. The way Fivetran works is different than the way that on-prem the traditional ETL tools worked. And in fact, Fivetran couldn't have come about without the emergence of cloud data warehouses. So for us, that's the key thing is not just the cloud in general, but the rise of cloud native data warehouses in particular.
Yeah. Can you say more about how Fivetran works in a way that someone who's not a scientist can understand?
Sure. So, well, I don't know that being a scientist is no help in understanding this space. I had to learn everything from square one. But the business data that companies collect and care about what their salespeople are doing, what their employees' performance reviews are, where all of their bottles of detergent waiting to be sold are in the country. Data like that generally lives in two places. It lives in operational systems. So that's kind of home for the data. That's Salesforce, payment systems, databases, systems like SAP. So that's like where the data, that's home for the data. That's where the data gets updated. When you move that shipping container of detergent to the next state over, you go and you change that row in the operational system about where it is. And then most companies, once they reach a certain size, build a data warehouse. And the purpose of the data warehouse is to have a copy of all of the data in the company. So there's many operational systems, but ideally there's only one data warehouse. In reality, often you end up with multiple, but in a perfect world, if everyone could wave a magic wand and just have one data warehouse, they would. That's the goal. And so but you need to make a copy, and then you need to keep that copy up to date. As shipping containers move around, as employees get paid, as customers do transactions, that creates new records, that updates records. All those changes need to get replicated into the central data warehouse, and that's what Fivetran does. And what makes Fivetran special is that we make the process very automated. So you as a user don't really have to know or care about the details of how the data gets from the place where it lives, the system of record, into the data warehouse. It's very complicated, but all the complexity is hidden behind the scenes by Fivetran. And there's a whole set of choices that we made about how Fivetran works that enable that automation. And it has, it has pros and cons. There are benefits to being able to control the exact details of how the data moves. But overall, Fivetran's approach has been successful because people like that automation and they like not having to worry about the details of how the data gets from here to there.
Yeah, just being able to trust that it's happening. Some trust and verify involved. That's
totally.
Great.
And that's something we're working on a lot right now, is actually building tools to allow the user to verify that the data is correct. Like, it is correct. We kind of know it's correct because we have so many users using the same pipelines that there's a kind of a collective bug reporting that works really well. But as an individual user, you still want to be able to prove that the data is actually the same.
Yeah. You see all the metadata in there. So you have your hands on a lot of companies' data. What's your approach to security at Fivetran?
So one of the nice things about being a managed service is that we can watch the infrastructure that is moving the data very closely. And so we can ultimately provide much better security than the traditional way of doing ETL, where everyone owns and operates their own unique pipelines, all in their own unique infrastructure, which is kind of a back office function in every company, and thus doesn't get the attention it deserves from a security perspective. I actually think a lot of data leaks are actually ETL pipelines, are like home built ETL pipelines. Like if you look at like the Equifax leak, I bet that was an ETL pipeline that was just not well secured. So because we're a managed service, we have a whole staff of people who focus 24/7 on security, and we build security into the platform in various fundamental ways. For example, we don't retain any of the customer's data. We hold it only as long as we need to, and we have a specific strategy about how we encrypt the data and where the keys for that data lives and how long those keys survive. And part of this is to prevent hacks. part of it is to prevent, accidents. A lot of data leaks are fundamentally accidents. So there's a whole strategy around that. There's a whole staff of people who work all the time on that. The fundamental pillar is, don't retain the data, and then try to make everything as single tenant as possible. So all of each individual customer, actually each individual pipeline, lives in its own memory space, in its own cryptographic space. They can't talk to each other even if we wanted them to.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you for that. I'm just reflecting, you've had just such a successful last couple of years, more than doubling your revenue. You increased your customer count by, I think, 75%, if my research is correct. You had your huge Series D where you got almost $500 million. Congratulations on that. And then you bought your biggest competitor. And I'm curious, is that HVR? Did you integrate the company, or how has that gone?
Well, we weren't actually each other's biggest competitors, interestingly.
Oh.
We tended to focus on different segments of the market. So HVR focused more on the biggest, most important databases like Oracle, SQL Server, DB2, Sybase, HANA in the largest companies. So like the biggest, baddest workloads there are.
Yeah.
And HBR is a funny company. It had been around for more than 20 years at this point, and they were just the absolute experts in these types of databases. And whereas Fivetran was more of a mid-market company, it was more of like medium-sized customers, more tech-forward companies, and we were really great. Sometimes in the context of these conversations, they talk about Befortran and HBR were merged together into Fivetran. So Befortran was really great at sort of all the cats and dogs, all the random applications that you needed. And then we were good at the open source databases like Postgres and MySQL that are mostly used by by newer companies. And then together we really created a full spectrum product that can address the entire market, all the different types of data sources, all the sizes of company. So that's what was so exciting about that acquisition, was the ability to target, the entire, every company size and every type of data source. And yes, we have integrated the product. So now if you look at the lineup of what you can get from Fivetran, there are pieces of that fundamentally are, the HVR code, and then there are pieces of that are the pre-acquisition Fivetran code.
Okay, great. Well, that makes me wonder sort of where do you think all this is going in terms of cloud-based data integration, and what do you see as next for Fivetran?
I mean, at this point, it's really the expansion phase of it. What the ecosystem has collectively created between us and the cloud data warehouses and the best BI tools and the data management tools like DBT is a stack that is really easy to set up, easy to maintain, high productivity. A small number of people can accomplish a lot with these tools. And that has allowed small and medium-sized companies to do things that they just previously couldn't. So there's a lot of that going on. And a lot of them have discovered it, but a lot of them still need to discover it.
Sure.
And then for large companies, it allows them, large companies have an infinite appetite for data and for answers from that data. And so it's allowed them to just accomplish way more, to integrate way more data sources and to answer way more questions than they ever could before. So I think we're really now in the deployment phase of this. It's just reaching every single company, small, medium, and large, and not really small. Really small companies don't have data warehouses and shouldn't.
Right.
And then letting them know the good word. Hey, there's this great set of tools out there that's going to allow you to accomplish way more than you could before, and you should look at it. And when there's a reason to reconsider your analytics stack, like you should think about building it in this new way.
Yeah. Well, that's a great part of the curve to be on, George. Where what's in front of you is just deploy and expand. That's great. Let's talk about you and your team for a bit. So you have a PhD in neurobiology. Congratulations, of course, on that. That's
it's
amazing.
Kind of a funny background for a tech CEO. I can't say it's terribly useful.
Yeah. Oh, I'm sure you bring all the parts of yourself into that role. But I'm just curious how that might have shaped your leadership style. And if you think not much, what is your strategy for managing a global organization through hypergrowth?
Yeah, it's managing a big company is a funny thing. I After like 100 people, in some ways, it's kind of all the same because you
Mhm.
can't actually talk to them all every day, and so it becomes sort of abstract as you get larger. I spend a lot of time trying to figure out what should I involve myself in, where can I
Mhm.
help, where can I change something for the better. The organization is filled with great people who
Yeah.
work very hard, very independently, and so it will just do its thing. They'll all go. They don't need me in order to get up in the morning and do their work. So, for me, my leadership style is a lot about inserting myself in the right places where I can help make things better, solve problems. I'm not always right. Sometimes I get involved and I regret it. I'm like, oh man, I went in and stirred the soup and did not help. And sometimes I do help, and I just try to make that second category bigger than the first.
All right, great. I'm sure that's super successful, right? That's all people want from a CEO is to make sure there's a vision in place, make sure there's a company is well managed from a financial standpoint, and then removing obstacles so that they can get up and do their jobs every day. And it's terrific. I'm remembering I did some work with Ross Mason when he was CEO at MuleSoft a long time ago, and he said every end of every year he would sit down with his feet up and a glass of whiskey and just think about what does MuleSoft need from me next year. And that was the big question. And then he would decide where in the organization he would sort of focus his energies based on the answer to that question. And I love that because it was so egoless, right? It just wasn't about, what do I want to do next year? What are my goals? It's what does this company need from me? So yeah, finding your spots to insert. That's great. Many of the founders and CEOs that I've spoken with, George, have said that there's a great role of curiosity and continuous learning, that those two areas have really played a big part in their own leadership journeys. Would you say that's been true for you?
Mm. Well, I'm a founder CEO, so I was
Yeah.
never a manager other than being CEO of this company. So I think, yeah, I would say continuous learning has been big.
Yeah.
Fortunately, I have a lot of good mentors, and we've been able to hire a lot of great leaders at Fivetran who I've been able to learn from,
Well,
rely on.
thank and rely on. Exactly. Well, lastly, in my consulting business, my tagline is up and to the right because that's the spot on the 2x2 matrix where we always want to be. And I wonder if there was a moment in your career when you knew that you were moving up and to the right, in the right direction.
Well, first of all, just as an aside, I'll tell you a tiny story about.
Sure.
I once made a 2x2 matrix in an early fundraising deck where the good box was not the one that was up and to the right, and it was incredibly confusing to everyone.
I bet it
So
was.
I say I didn't have you to give me that advice. You're like, wait, why is Fivetran not in the up and to the right box? I'm like, oh, because the good one is lower right. I haven't made that mistake again. But when did I realize the company was really working? It's funny. In many ways, it was after we got our first customer.
Hmm.
Fivetran went from not knowing if we would ever have a customer to a week later. If you had asked me what would be happening today, I would not have been that far off. It was so binary, product market fit. It happened basically in a week. It took a while for others to realize that. It took a while for
Mhm.
us to start growing really fast. But I think from our perspective, we knew we had it. We had caught the car just when we got that first customer.
Yeah, that's great. Well, again, congratulations on all of that. And thanks so much for joining us today. Wish you and your company all the best.
Thank you.
All right, take good care.